I wanted to create an idea in the book that would help people to explore themselves, to explore the fact that their spirits did not remain in the containers even during life, that it was possible for a soul to travel. And most important of all, I promised my son when he had a strong suspicion that he wouldn't live his whole life, that I would establish, and his concerns and my concerns for the children of this planet, who I believe are the hope and future of this planet, that a foundation would be created in my son's name, a 501c3 under the jurisdiction of the IRS, and that all proceeds from this book shall go to that foundation.
One of the first things that you address in the book is the cloning of a human. I was wondering if you could expound on that.
Well, even though I didn't say what happened specifically because of national security section 3, subsection 312, I did say that 2 other scientists and myself did create a clone. We used genetic material from ourselves, mostly mine, and it was a project that was terminated when I spent time with this individual, explaining to him that in the military handbook for both officers and enlisted men, you have a right to question the morality and ethicality of an order. And he failed a direct order. And I say in the book he was terminated, but I helped him get away.
Dr. Wolf, I just wanted to find out if you could tell us anything about cattle mutilation.
Ooh, I better be careful here. Even though it's not as in medicine, we know we can't transfuse cow's blood directly into humans, like some people think. Cows are enormously similar to humans in genetics, and if you read Michael Crichton's book on why they had to use frog, you know, when you are genetically engineering something, you need a cap on each sequence, and it is the cattle that provide those caps on engineering hybrids.
I understand that
they have to, each sequence, once they go through a sequencing process, each one has to be capped with something that is not necessarily the same genetic material, but is close enough to allow for a hybridization process to be viable.
Is this the reason why only certain parts of the tongue?
Yes, because they are the most highly concentrated genetic material.
It seems kind of odd that they simply don't take the whole cow, and if they use the part of it that they need, they'll just take a ray gun and emulsify the rest of it. Instead, they go to the trouble, or they don't go to the trouble. Whatever they do is they just throw the cattle back onto the poor rancher's land and fly off, with the rancher having to clean up this mess. why don't they just simply either, as I say, incinerate or emulsify or liquidate or laser into nothingness what they don't need, or why don't they just simply grow their own? I mean, what's the problem here? Why do they want
The problem is in the microgravity that they travel in. It's very difficult to grow cows. Sorry, but that's the fact.
But
we're going to find in long space voyages for humans that we're going to have problems in reproduction. We're finding that in a polluted, toxic atmosphere anyway. And the number of clinics for fertility has skyrocketed. It's a multi-billion-dollar business now. As we pollute and toxify, sterility and the inability to bring forth children is occurring more and more. Also, in a microgravity atmosphere or an aerospace environment, it would be very difficult to breed cows. Why they don't emulsify them or vaporize them, I don't know. I really don't.
You did opine once that they're trying to tell us by this act.
Oh, I think, yes, that too. That we should know their presence. I mean, all of the things they do are leading us to the day when they're going to be landing, and we'll have hope by then that we're not going to attack them.
Before you were 12 years old, had you experienced contact or abduction? And then I was going to ask you, but didn't. Did your mother faint upon hearing of this event?
She not only fainted, but she became more and more hysterical, where she needed to be put on something called Miltown, which was the famous...
the Prozac of its era.
Well, the Valium of its era.
Valium of its era,
yes.
Sorry. And your father...
Miltown, which is methylphenidate.
And of course your father was more understanding.
He was, because I don't think, he told me not to mention it in front of my mother because she had a tremendous problem with my birth, and he didn't go into any of the details, but hinted an awful lot about it, that my birth, he was overseas when I was born.
So there may have been ET contact at your birth?
There was ET contact at my birth.
And she had maybe blocked it out, and when you began to disclose these matters, it all started to come back and...
like a post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
Only it was frightening.
Yeah, especially, sensitive.
Especially to me, being, her first son and thinking everything would be okay, regardless, because I had faith in them, in the visitors. I had faith in what I call the out-of-towners, and my little invisible space friends, which my father asked the color, and then I said there was my little invisible gray space friends, and he said, "You sure they weren't green?" And I said, "No, they were gray." And he said, "That's the same as mine." So it ran in the family.
Did it run in his family before, in earlier generations?
I cannot be sure. He did say that his father had some very unusual experiences in Russia, in the former Soviet Union, before, it was the Bolsheviks, and that's when my grandfather escaped with my grandmother from Russia, and they had some experience with it. So it did, I don't know how far back it ran, but it did go to my father's father, it did go to my mother's mother, and then my mother. And then it traveled on to, besides myself, my wife and my son. So I was quite comfortable with my wife and my son discussing it. Although I don't think I was ever totally comfortable. Because I always felt, if you will excuse the pun, I always felt alienated.
Great. So you're alienated from the aliens and alienated from the humans?
No, I felt much more comfortable with the aliens than I did with humans.
Okay.
They referred me, or at least the Nordics referred to me as his other brother.
Robert Dean, I don't know whether you know Sergeant Major Robert Dean, who worked...
I had the pleasure of talking with him once.
Okay, so you're aware of his material generated from SHAPE in Europe, and the study they did regarding during the Cold War the
assessment, yes, I know the assessment.
And that there were at least 4 ET races investigating us simultaneously, but not necessarily interconnected with each other in any genetic way.
Maybe at the highest level there was some interconnection, but I am aware of his getting a hold of the assessment, and I think it boggled his mind a bit.
Well, what Dean told us is that we knew of, that is, the generals who were leading the investigation for the security headquarters of the European NATO command, that they knew of the Zetas, Zeta 4s. They knew of the reptoids, but the 2 entities that were most baffling and off-putting to them were the humanoids.
Oh, you mean the ones that look like humans but were really hybrid?
Well, that's a question that I can't myself speak to, but from their standpoint,
they call them their brother race.
I wanted to talk a little bit about DART because that came up earlier and we didn't get into it. The Defense Alien Research Training, or Defense of Aliens and Rescue Training or Rescue Teams.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Well, we figured that it was so compartmentalized, maybe we could compartmentalize within the compartment that we were situated in, that we did not approve of how they were treating guests of the government. And so we took and we exploited an ongoing project and turned the meaning around for some of us to help them get back to their people. When they were being held as guests of the United States government, incommunicado, and virtually prisoners.
And how is this affected?
The details are really not at this point
disclosed.
Yeah, it's not something I prefer to disclose.
I wouldn't have expected you to, but I thought that the question
disclose at this time.
Yeah, I thought that the question would give our audience.
Well, there's some of us that were on the inside who believed that they weren't being treated right. If you saw an autopsy table with Velcro tie-down straps, you know, I mean, was that to keep an unmoving person, a dead put down, or perhaps to do an autopsy or dissection of one whose organs were functioning at the time? This is abhorrent to me as a physician, because in the Hippocratic, or shall I say hypocritical oath, it does do no harm, and I think that should be universal.
It could be argued by certain people, not necessarily any of us here, that it's tit for tat. After all,
but they are not dissecting us and killing us. They are returning those people. And you've got to understand that the abductee who has the initial experience can be frightened. I was frightened years ago when a portal appeared in my living room, and I was almost hysterical.
Recently, in the media, a instrument board or instrument, the pilot station, purportedly was found. That is,
with the 6 fingers.
Yes, with the hand. Yeah, with the hand.
Yeah, well, that's a neurological interface, and that was part of my work at S4. Is how do we neurologically interface with machinery, or machinery that is organic to some degree. And that the capacitant switches and fiber optics were all involved in that, and that was going back to 47.
And so these were 6-fingered. Are these? The Zetas have 6 fingers? We always thought that they had 3.
Particularly, I call these the oranges because they're pink and brown. They're pinkish brown skin. And those were the ones that the so-called Santilli films showed the deceptions of. I didn't call them autopsies. You
call them the oranges. Certain investigators out in Sedona call them the Corts, C-O-R-T-S. And they claim that these 6-fingered people are artificial or hybrids. And that
they might be. I really don't know too much about them, except that I have seen autopsy films similar to the one that Santilli released.
Have you met Santilli?
No. But I've seen in private and secluded in the Foreign Technology Division underground at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I've seen similar dissections on film that were done in the late 40s.
We've never seen a dissection or a movie of a Nordic, only of the Zeta Reticuli.
I don't think there's ever been one of a Nordic, because I don't think they've ever crashed, or we've ever been able to capture them, kill them, or have them die for some reason, and do an autopsy on them. At least I have not been privy to it.
Yeah, Michael, I'm just changing the subject a little bit, but the one paragraph you have, there are no more excuses. In other parts of this galaxy, not to mention other galaxies, cosmic neighbors are running out of endurance and patience. And we've labeled time as being BC, as being AD, and now you have it also labeled as AA, after the arrival. Do you see this in the foreseeable future? If they're running...
Yeah, I see it both in the future, and there are 2 AAs after the initial arrivals and in the prehistory of man, and then in the recent returns, or maybe they've been coming here, but I think that to date, after the arrival, for the future would be after whether the government comes clean or not, they're going to be arriving. And it's not going to be for war. It's going to be to establish open diplomatic relations.
People, if once the contact is made, are going to lose their discipline. If the ETs make formal contact, then people might start to look to them for leadership, and our own ranks would lose their discipline.
No government wants to lose its power. No one in power wants to lose their power. And no utility company wants to get a cheap, source of energy that would interfere with their profit taking.
Would our species be able, with its present state of maturity, would it be able to handle the kind of time, the kind of freedom that the technology that is out there would give our species?
Well, that's a point I think I addressed in the book, and not so much the time it would give if they gave us all of this technology. I don't think it would be a matter of giving it to us all at once, and the government has proved that already. They're holding back a lot of technology, simply because we still have tribal warfare on this island Earth, if you want to call it that way. We are an island in this vast galaxy alone, and or this water world Earth. We still have tribal warfare. We still hate one another. We're still with the human equation that the aliens or the out-of-towners are still trying to understand over a long, long period of time. And that's how a soldier can shoot a whole family, mother, grandmother, wife, husband, children, dog, etc., and then throw himself on a grenade to protect his buddies. They don't understand this. They don't, there are elements of the human equation that are still difficult for them. And this is why I believe the abduction scenario continues to repeat. They're still looking for answers. They want to know more about why we love. I feel that over the last 50 years or so, we have been looking for a new pathways to spirituality, and that's one of the issues I address in the book. We have progressed, and I think Whitley Strieber has said, in fact, it's almost as if we have invited them and said it was time for you to come and begin interacting with us. That we have risen somewhat in our spirituality, even though we're still plagued with hostilities and jealousies and avarice, greed and power, etc. But many people, because of the Celestine prophecy, selling as many copies as it did, and groups now studying the Celestine prophecies in a sense of finding new ways to approach life. This is one of the ambitions, even though it's a seemingly very high ambition, that I have in my book, is for people to concentrate more on the fact that they are an integral part of a universe that is alive and connected. And that the further we go spiritually, perhaps we can make up for the huge difference between humanity and the race for technology.